A grumpy person doesn't get much work done. And a person who's focused on all the reasons why something isn't going to work is not going to do the work to figure it out. But the good news is you are in charge of this. You are responsible for your perception and your attitude, and that in turn affects how smart and how hard you work, and that affects the results you get. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 167 with me, Tara Swiger. You can find notes and links to everything that we talk about here at taraswiger.com/podcast 167. Last week, I started talking about my morning routine, and in doing so, I hit on how it lines up with the research on happiness, on the 5 things you can do each day to make sure you have a happier, more productive day. And you all wrote in to tell me that you loved that, and several of you told me you listened to it multiple times, listen to that bit about happiness habits on repeat. So today I wanted to dive into that happiness research a little bit deeper. Now, I want you to know this is not necessarily about happiness and mood as much as it is about having the life and the business that you really want, by paying attention to how your perception shapes your reality and your actions, and by paying attention to how you perceive the world around you. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about being in a good mood. So I got much of what we're going to be talking about from Shawn Achor's books. He's a positive psychologist, and a positive psychologist is just a person who studies how successful people live, as opposed to studying when our mental health breaks down. His books, Before Happiness and The Happiness Advantage, I'll link them up in the show notes. But he is a researcher, a psychological researcher, and in his books, he reports on his own experiments and other people's experiments on how perception shapes reality, and that increases our success or our achievement or not. So he really talks a lot about how perception shapes our reality and how that can be positive or negative. But I want to define some terms first. So perception is simply how we see the world. And reality is then the world that we experience and how we act in that world because of those perceptions. So the quote from him is, "It turns out that our brains are literally hardwired to perform at their best, not when they're negative or even neutral, but when they're positive." So we are going to get our best results from shifting our perception from the negative to the positive. That doesn't mean that we pretend like things aren't bad or that we don't deal with things when they come up, and we're actually going to talk about that. It means that you make sure that you're choosing a perception that serves you in the moment. So when we talk about perception versus reality, when I first read this book, I was like, that's a little woo-woo. Like, that is a little like, oh, just think and everything will be better. And that annoys me. But the science shows that there's a measurable fact that perception affects the reality that we live in. So I like to think of it like this. In the middle of winter, after days and days of freezing weather, when a sunny day in the mid-50s, and this is Fahrenheit for you Europeans, when it's a sunny day in the mid-50s, it will make you say, oh my goodness, this is such a warm day. Can you believe the warm weather we're having? This is so warm. But if we had a 50-degree weather, if we had a 50-degree day right now in the middle of July when it's super, super heat hot, we would instead be saying like, oh my goodness, can you believe how cold it is? It is so freaking cold right now. So that's just an example of how your perception of something, like the temperature is a reality. 50 degrees is a reality, but your perception changes how you experience that reality. It changes the reality of your experience of the exact same temperature, if you consider that temperature to be super warm or if you consider that temperature to be super cool. The temperature, which is reality, is the same, but the reality of your situation changes because your perception has changed. Now, the same perception reality thing comes into play in your own business. So I'm going to ask you, I want you to answer this in your own head. Is a month with $1,000 in sales a good month or a slow month? Now, this is entirely going to depend on your own perception of your business and what your business is capable of and what your business has done so far. So when I first got it started, $1,000 month would be amazing. But right now, $1,000 month would be a huge disappointment. because it's 100% of my income. And I would be really struggling and be really upset with $1,000 a month. So neither answer, though, is objectively right or wrong. It's not objectively good or bad. It depends on your situation and your perception and what you want and need out of your business. So when we talk about perception and reality, that is what we're talking about. And then we're talking about, beyond that, you choosing your perception in the moment. So are you choosing a positive and true reality, not like a made-up, make-believe reality, or a negative reality? Now, that negative reality might also be true, but what studies show is that it closes you off from finding more opportunities and paths to success. So studies show that when you operate from a positive, true reality, you actually see more opportunities and you see more paths to get to the success you want to get to. So I absolutely love reading about studies like this because it reflects exactly what I hear from you, the people that I am working with and the people that I help, the people who are trying to create businesses. This is what I hear from you. Many of you have amazingly brilliant ideas and you have lots of enthusiasm until your perception shifts and you focus on the competition, on how much hard work it's going to be, on how very many things could go wrong, about if everybody's going to hate you or what might happen if things happen and they don't go right. The enthusiasm and the energy drains out of you until you can't see any of the opportunities in front of you and you can't spot any path that would lead you to success, and you think, I'm going to be a failure. All paths lead to failure. So I was delighted to read that this phenomenon, which I've experienced with many of you in conversations over the years, it is not just you or me, it's how our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to watch out for danger in order to stay alive, and that means we have what psychologists call a negativity bias. Our brains are better at picking out the negative and focusing on it than picking out the positive and focusing on it. But I'm even more delighted to have learned ways of getting around this inner Eeyore effect in helping you find the light and the enthusiasm again. And we can do this by choosing the positive, true reality. Now, again, this is not like a positive, unreal reality, but there's always multiple perceptions to take on a situation, and one would be the positive, true perception, and many would be the negative, but maybe also true perceptions. So the question is, if you want to choose the positive perception, because a positive perception makes you see more opportunities, it makes you see more paths to success, it keeps you energized and moving forward and taking action. That's the reason why we're talking about all of this, is because if you're not taking action, it's often because the only reality you see is negative and dark and gloomy and failure-ridden. So we need you to pick the positive perception to create that reality of there being opportunities, there being paths forward, there being things that will be okay if you choose to do this. So how? How do you do this? The first thing is to realize that you are choosing your perception of reality. You are choosing it. You are always in the middle of choosing a positive, real perception or a negative perception. So when you realize that you're choosing that perception, and then you take responsibility for choosing the one that is going to be most useful. The most useful perception is a positive, real perception. Then you take action towards shifting that perception. When you realize you have the power to choose it, then you have to take action to shift it. Now, there's a lot of things you can do here, from tiny actions, like just standing up and moving around, to totally changing your reframing and how you're looking at the situation, to totally changing your definition of success for the situation, or there are all kinds of different things you can do. But I want to just be honest, this sometimes is really hard. Like, as I was working on this today, this afternoon, I was super cranky with Jay. And I did not want to sit down and write about happiness research because I was really cranky, and I don't want to be a hypocrite and talk about happiness when I'm feeling like super grumpy monster. But then I realized one of the things I was going to write about was shifting your perception and taking radical responsibility for the way you're seeing reality. So here's a couple things. For starters, I could reframe what I'm cranky at him about. I could decide to shift the framework of that whole situation. Or I could decide to just not think about him altogether, which is what I'm going for. I could decide I'll think about this later when he gets home, and instead I'm thinking about the podcast episode. Or I could help myself stop thinking about it and shift my perception by putting on music and dancing around. I could start diffusing some uplifting oils, which is what I did. I could pick up a book and I could read for a while. I could sit down and write, which is what I did. I could do any of the things I know that cheer me up and shift how I'm seeing the world. Because I wasn't just cranky at him, I was cranky at the whole world because he's ruined everything. If he's listening to this later, he's going to be like, what did I do? But that's the thing. I needed to shift my perception of the whole world in order to be able to sit down and write this and think about this. So I want to give you some ideas for what you can do to shift your perception. The first thing, and we've talked about this way back in Month of Biz Love. So on my YouTube channel, we talked about power-ups, doing things that will make you feel good. Now, this can be listening to some music, dancing around, drinking a glass of water, smelling uplifting essential oils, but doing things make you feel good. And to start with, make a list of those things for you. I have a list in the front of my Filofax planner of power-ups that I could do that would help any move. So here are some other things that might help you shift your perception. When we face challenges, often our emotions take over when we get overwhelmed, and we just get hijacked by all of the emotional worries and fretting and feeling awful. To regain that control and to chill out, it will help to shift your focus to small, manageable goals and then gradually expand our circle to achieve bigger and bigger ones. This is something Sean Acor talks about in his research as the Zorro circle. You pick a tiny area and you gain control in that tiny area, and then you expand it out. So when things are really going bad, when I'm talking to a client or a friend and things are going bad in a bunch of areas of their life, I say, okay, what's one area of your life we could regain some control over, that you can see you have control over, and we can take action to shift that one little area. And then you expand it out now. Karen, who's watching live, recently moved. When you move your whole house across the country, you can't try to manage everything and fix everything and make everything good, but you can focus on a little bit. You can unpack your kitchen and make that your center of where you're putting your focus, and then expand out from there as things get better and better. So we also can recognize that you set the parameters for what good or successful or bad or unsuccessful or failure is. So define success so that it's easier to reach or it's more enjoyable to reach. Sean Acor talks about setting a bigger target so that it's easier to reach, or selecting a target that's closer to you. So if one of your goals was to make $100,000 a year, you could set the goal of making $50,000 this year, or maybe just $25,000 in your first year. My business has grown for the past 6 or 7 years, 50% each year. So in the beginning, the growth was small because the business was small, right? It might have went from 20 to 30,000. Then it went from 30 to 45,000. And then the growth started to get bigger, right? Because half of 45 is bigger than half of 20. And then, so it wasn't huge growth, but by making that target closer, I was more able to achieve it, which also gave me the sense of well-being and accomplishment, which created the momentum for me to keep moving forward. So recognize that you set the parameters of what good and successful are, and decide to change your parameters if your parameters are constantly shifting you towards the negative perception of how everything's going wrong. This is one of the biggest perception shifts you can make in your business, is to change how you're looking at it. You can also call this reframing. I have an episode of the podcast, 2 episodes actually, I'll link up, about reframing. So when we reframe failure as an opportunity for growth, we are more likely to experience growth. There's a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth, where people experience traumas and grow from them, as opposed to become ill from them or become stagnant because of them. That's when you can only do that if you've reframed that failure as an opportunity for growth. You can also reframe any situation, anything. You can decide, what if I look at this from a different framework? And see if that helps you come up with more solutions and more actions you can take. Another thing you can do to shift your perception is to celebrate successes. So we did this each week in the Starship. I ask everybody what's going well, and it's so good. It's so good for morale. It's so good for you. It's good for your motivation. It'll give you momentum and keep going. So what I suggest you do is you write down all you've done towards your goal already. So if you have a goal and you're feeling meh about it, write down everything you've done towards it already. And then write down all the assets and strengths you have, like the things that you have that are going to keep you, that are going to get you even closer to it. So showing yourself that you're closer to your goal changes the perceived difficulty, which makes it easier for you to actually do. I know it's crazy because you think, well, it's still the same goal. I should be able to reach it in the same way. But actually recognizing the strengths and assets you have and already all the steps you've done to it will make it that much easier for you to do. The fourth thing you can do to change your perception is to shift your body. Literally move your body and change positions. So go for a walk, smell some essential oils, dance around the room. Literally changing your body will change your perception, because changing your body does in fact change your mind, and it changes how your mind is handling things and perceiving things and filtering things and dealing with them. So this is why I like essential oils so much. Your olfactory bulb, like where things go when you smell them, leads directly into your limbic system. And your limbic system is where stress and worry and all your emotions are generated from. So by smelling specific oils, they immediately change the chemicals in your brain and your body, and thus pretty much immediately can help you shift your mood and your perception in a matter of seconds. That's super cool. So I love talking about this so much. As you guys know, I'm going to hold a webinar tomorrow about essential oils for mood management, specific oils you can use to manage your mood and help shift your perceptions. We'll talk more about shifting your perceptions and happiness in that. So if you want to know more about how to use oils for your mood or dealing with anxious or depressed feelings, you can join us at taraswiger.com/EO. for essential oils. taraswiger.com/EO. That's a sign up for. Sign up there. You'll get access to that webinar. So there's one last thing about all of this, about your perception and about happiness and about shifting so that you can see the opportunities in front of you. And this is a big one. You need to take radical responsibility. That means take responsibility for all of the things, basically. Now, responsibility is not blame. It's not guilt. It's not, it's just recognizing that you can change things. So what I like to do when people, usually it's in the map making process where we take a goal and we break it down into steps. Someone will say, well, I'm not in control of this. What do I do about the things I'm not in control of? This is what I like to suggest. When I say take radical responsibility for all the things, you are like, well, what about all the things I'm not in control of? Like in my being grumpy at Jay, I'm not in control of his reactions. I'm not in control of the things he says to me. So how do you deal with that? The first one, there's 3 steps. Number 1, list all the things you can control. All the things you can control. I can control my own reaction. I can control what I choose to do with that reaction, what I choose to say. If there's an argument, there's no argument, but if there is, I can choose what I say and which direction that leads a conversation. I can choose the energy I bring to it. Am I going to be super grumpy, or am I going to be loving? Am I going to be looking for blame, or am I going to be looking for a solution that serves everybody? Also, the things I can control are like what else I do with my day. I can control if I let grumpiness ruin my whole day. I can control if I've eaten lunch, if I've smelled my favorite oils, if I've drank enough water, which I probably haven't. So list all of the things you're in control of. And guess what? You're in control of all of you. Yes, you're in control of how you take care of yourself. You're in control of what you choose to do with your time. You're in control of that. So make a list of the things that you can control, and recognize that this is way more. You have way more control than you have been acting like. 100% of the time. This is true for me too. All the times I'm realizing, holy crap, I've been acting like a victim about that, when really I was in control of a couple of those aspects of it. That's radical responsibility. Then list all the things you can't control. You can't control other people. You can't control what they do. You can't control what they say. You can't control really just that they do the thing that bugs you even when you don't want them to. You can't control the weather. We just had our electricity go out the other day because of the weather. What else can't you control? There are things. List them about the things you're upset about. You can't control if people buy your stuff. You can't control how they react to your stuff. You can control, do you explain it effectively to them? Are you using words that they will understand? You can control if you're taking great photographs. You can control if you're properly expressing the value when you do your pricing, and then how you explain that value to them and how you demonstrate that value in your photographs, in your packaging, in your word choice, in your grammar. So list the things you can't control, list the things you can, and then I find it helps to sing the song Let It Go while you let go of the things you can't control. Once you've listed all the things you can't control, let go of them. You can't control them. You can't make people buy no matter how much you want to in your business. So let go of that and focus instead on the things that you can control. You just listed a whole bunch of those. So let go of your list of things you can't control and focus on the things you can. Right? Your attitude, the way you approach it, the way you explain things, the way you show up in the world, how much hard work you do, those are all within your control. One of the things I like that Gary Vaynerchuk always says in his videos is hard work is the variable. Talent is completely outside of your control, how much talent you were born with, but hard work is the variable to success that everybody has control over. So it's the one area you definitely are in control of. So my hope with this episode is that it will help you shift your perception and see the opportunities in your reality, and at the very least have a more joyful and enthusiastic day. I would love to hear about how you are shifting your perceptions, how you are looking for more opportunities and more paths to success, and share it with me on Instagram using the hashtag #ExploreYourEnthusiasm. And I wish you a very joyful, enthusiastic day.